any of the comments that come in. My name is Charles Owen. My role at Paladin is I manage business alliances for the company, and I get the privilege of doing webinars every now and again, as well as demonstrations. Been with Paladin almost 10 years now. The title for today for this presentation is the many uses for reference margin, and it's one that I'm very excited about because this is one of those little tasty little morsels in Paladin that you don't really know the power of it until you peel back the onion and take a closer look at it. This is a very powerful feature that I will be discussing. If you miss this presentation, or if you get distracted, or a customer comes up, they're your first priority, and you must help them, you can always come back and watch this at a later time. We are recording this. It will be played back on at your upon any time that you want to at the portal.paladinpos.com/webinars. All right. Other than that, we can go ahead and get started here. So again, I appreciate everybody for coming today. This is going to be about a 20-minute presentation. It's not very long. I'm going to go through it kind of quickly, but you always have the video to fall back on. The many uses of reference margin. So what is the purpose of a reference margin? We'll discuss that. We'll look at that in detail. How can reference margins help you? We'll also determine where you might be able to use reference margins. Not everybody will use every feature of the reference margin, but you may. The different types of reference margins, we'll go into look at each of those, and then how to set it up for each of the types. The three types that we're going to be discussing are trickle-down tiered discounts, pretty catchy name, dump skew, margin control, and fixed margin pricing. These are all things that you can do with that one reference margin field. And then we'll go into how you can learn more, different KBAs, knowledge-based articles, as well as webinars and videos that you can watch to get better versed on reference margins. So what's the purpose of a reference margin? Well, there's three purposes that I found. One is to automate price updates based on the cost of an item. So as you receive an item in through a PO and the cost changes, you can have it automatically adjust the price. The next is to preserve proper margins on dump skews. So anybody using dump skews out there, if you're using dump skews and it's tied to a department, if you're not paying special attention to reference margins when you do dump skews, it's really going to throw off your numbers, and that's not a good thing. So we'll talk about how you can set that up. And then also to maintain quantity price discounts. So this is something that, and the word here really should be to automatically maintain quantity discounts. All right, so let's look at the how they can help us. All right, reference margins do a number of things. They preserve margin controls, so they can help maintain a set margin on items that don't necessarily have a cost or a price, like dump skews, for example, so fasteners and so on. You can stabilize your revenue reports. Again, if you're not using reference margins and you're using things like dump skews, you are not going to get the results that you want to get on those revenue reports. Automate price consistency. So for things like things that are changing, the cost is changing all the time, high commodity items that you need to keep up with, you can, this will help you stabilize those price consistencies. Also provide departmental level margin control, again, tied to these dump skews. Reduce back office errors. So if you're getting price changes all the time and you're having to go in and physically and manually update prices for whatever reason, whether they are items that are dump skews or perhaps they're items where you're doing trickle-down pricing based on quantity discount breaks, this is going to help you there, as well as control your profits or losses. So your revenue reports are tied a lot to these revenue, the reference margins. So we'll talk about that in detail as well. So breaking down the different types of reference margins, you have the trickle-down tiered discounts. These are to automate quantity price discounts up to 4 levels deep. So I'll show you how to do this. Right now, if you're putting in quantity discount breaks, and you're actually putting a physical price in, for example, one is $1, but if you buy 2, you get them for 75 cents each. If you're doing something like that and you're hard coding the price in, whenever you change that each price, it doesn't trickle down. You have to go and readjust those prices. Well, this is a method using trickle-down tiered pricing that will automate that function. So anytime that price changes, it'll trickle down to the quantity discount break pricing automatically, whether it's through an EDI event or whether you manually go in and change the price. It's pretty cool. The dump SKU margin control maintains item level and departmental level margins for non-inventory items. And then fixed margin pricing is just that. The margin stays fixed anytime the cost changes on an EDI event through a PO receive, whether that's through a manual PO receive or electronic EDI. It will automatically look at that reference margin and change the price, the retail price, accordingly. So you don't have to go in and babysit these items. If a new cost structure comes in on a high commodity product where you will need to go in and change that price so that you don't lose money or that you don't lose the business if it's priced too high, this fixed margin pricing will automate that functionality for you. All right, so how you set it up. This is kind of straightforward. The trickle-down tiered pricing discounts, dump SKU margin control, and fixed margin pricing all share the same field, and that is the ref field, which stands for reference margin. And we'll show how to affect each one of these, beginning with how to set up the trickle-down tiered discounts. So this is the one. This is so cool. There's so many folks that I speak to that don't utilize this functionality, and it is so powerful. There's a couple of cool things about it, and then there's some caveats. Number one cool thing is, again, anytime the sales price changes, so you'll see the long arrow on the screen, anytime that price changes, it will trickle down to the quantity discount pricing. It doesn't, one of the caveats is it doesn't do any rounding because we're looking at a point system here, a percentage discount, an exact percentage discount. So if you have a price, sale price as we do here in the example of $294 per each, well, if you buy 5 or more, it drops down to $264. Look on the left part of the screen there. And then if you go to 10, it's going to drop down to $235 each. And that's just based on a 10% discount for the first 5 and a 20% discount for the second 5, or the total of 10. And that's derived from the sales price. So if I were to go in and change that sale price, it'll automatically change. If you receive a product and you change the sales price, or you change the sale price on using the RF gun, it'll trickle down. Again, this is all automated. All you have to do is this: enter a percentage prefaced by a minus. So you just say -10 or -20, and it will do the math for you all the time. So that's trickle-down tier discounts, and that's all you have to do. Now, what makes this a trickle-down is the minus in front of the discount under the reference margin field. And you don't change the first one for the each. You only change the 2 below it, or the 3 below it for quantity discount level 2, 3, or 4. All right, let's move on to the next one, how to set up a dump SKU margin. Now, this one's pretty simple. Most everybody should be doing this. If you're getting those revenue reports and you're wondering on your daily revenue report why a certain department is completely in the negative or it's 100%, it's because this isn't set appropriately for those dump SKUs. You should have a dump SKU for every different department. That way, not only do you keep the fixed margin for the SKU itself or the item, but you also handle it at the departmental level as well, which is very critical when you're looking at those reports. The prerequisite here is that you want to put a cost and a price of 0 and 0. Does it have to be? No, but if there is a cost and or a price, it's going to ignore that reference margin. So all you do here is zero cost, zero price, and put a reference margin. Regardless of what price you sell this for at checkout, it's going to automatically look at this particular example as a 35% margin, just across the board for that item and also for whatever department that particular dump SKU is in. So that is that's all there is to setting up dump SKUs for maintaining an appropriate margin. And this is very critical because this does influence a lot of reports. So let's look at the last one, and that is how to set up a fixed margin pricing. So this is for those high commodity items where you might receive a different cost, and based on that cost, you want a set margin. In this case, the margin is set at 46. I have an average cost, and that's what it's going to go off of, the average cost of $1.58. It's going to look at that reference margin and do the math and produce a sale price that's going to be consistent with maintaining that fixed margin. Now, this will not take effect in your system unless you go to the Paladin configuration window under the Company tab, under the Purchase Order section, and check the box Update Retail Pricing based on Receiving Cost and Reference Margin. That is a requirement for this feature to be activated. Is it nice? Yeah, this is really good. This isn't going to be how you set up every item in your store, obviously. You just wouldn't be competitive. But in the case of things like copper, lumber, some other materials that you might have that are very volatile in the market, you might want to maintain a margin, and this will allow you to do it. Now, if you go in and change the cost physically, manually, it will not reference that reference margin. So the only time the sale price will change when the cost changes is during a PO receive event, like it says on the left there. Retail prices will automatically adjust to cost changes during the PO receive or receive PO process. That's true for both manually received POs as well as EDI received POs. Now, I mentioned how to set up the fixed margin pricing, but how to activate it is, as I mentioned, you need to go into the File Setup Company tab under the section Purchase Orders. You'll see all my arrows there pointing to Company Purchase Orders, and then the actual item where you check the box where it says Update Retail Pricing based on Receiving Cost and Reference Margin. If you check that box, if you have a cost and a price and you put a reference margin in, upon your receiving event, if the cost changes, it will change your retail price. And it will earmark it for a bin tag to be printed later. That's all I have for you today. I mentioned it would be quick. It would be under 20 minutes. And we have a resource here that you can go to. And it's under our help portal, which is portal.paladinpos.com. A recording of this will be under /webinars or under the webinar section, but there are other articles as well, as I mentioned. So you can read about reference margins, how to set up and protect your margin on dump SKUs, how to add a reference margin to an inventory item, quantity pricing discounts using negative reference margins, which is the minus prior to the percentage, as I mentioned, how to set up reference margins, EDI process, quantity discount breaks, and others. And these are a few of the resources that are available, but there's always more coming online to talk about this subject. So now we have an opportunity to actually interact with me, the speaker and presenter, and if anybody wants to talk, you can either send in a text message or I can unmute you. If you wish to be unmuted and speak and ask questions verbally, totally fine. Don't be shy. Just raise your hand and I will unmute you accordingly and you'll be engaged in conversation. Otherwise, and I'll give you a minute or so, and Chad, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'm going to selfishly ask the first question if that's all right.
Yeah, please.
Could you explain maybe some of the differences between how to set up the reference margin for an EDI supplier versus a non-EDI supplier, and those locks, and what might happen if we don't control the locks for the right type of supplier?
Well, I think you're setting me up because I think you know the answer to this question.
I do.
Why don't you share it with everybody, because it is a relevant question, and I think it's very important. Anytime you have locks, it can affect or either positively or negatively, depending on what your goals you're trying to accomplish. So why don't you go ahead and share with us, Chad, the answer to that question, because I think it's a good one.
Okay, can you go back one slide so we can see the pricing screen again?
I think I can. Yes. There we go. This one?
Perfect, that one, yes, thank you. Okay, so for an EDI supplier, if you have that lock open, that lock means that EDI gets to control that first field right there, that 295. And so if you set a reference margin, your EDI file is going to overwrite whatever price that you have in that field. So your reference margin, if you're like, man, why is it not respecting my reference margin? It's because your EDI supplier, if this is an EDI item, is overriding the reference margin calculation that's happening there. And so you never, in effect, actually use the reference margin. So you need to lock the pricing level's little padlock right next to it, or right above that 294, to make sure that EDI is not going to update your sales price, and Paladin will then begin to respect your reference margin. On a non-EDI supplier, it doesn't really matter. It's an EDI control lock, and so you can just leave it open and go ahead and put the reference margin in there. Paladin will go ahead and respect that, just like Charles said, when you receive it in there. And I wouldn't be surprised, I am surprised at how many calls I get of people being like, it's not maintaining my reference margin, because they'll manually adjust their cost. So I think it bears mentioning again that it's only the event to calculate based off the reference margin is receiving those items in, whether EDI or non-EDI supplier.
Right. Now the same is true for cost, right? If you lock the cost field and cost changes are coming in from the EDI from your EDI event, it will not influence or affect or change that cost, which would thereby negate the change from the reference margin.
Absolutely correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. Do we have any questions coming through?
No questions. No.
Okay. Well, I am going to sign off here in a moment. I appreciate everybody for attending today. I hope this was useful information. This was, again, a quickie just about reference margins, but I think it is relevant. And I think if you're having issues with your revenue reports and or maintaining trickle-down pricing for your quantity discount breaks, or if you want to venture into setting a fixed margin and letting that be controlled through the EDI cost event, then I think this was relevant. So I thank you all for attending. Again, my name is Charles Owen, and Chad, thank you for helping out, and we will see everybody next time. Have a great day.